Welcome to The Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. My name is Emma and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today I'm joined by another amazing woman. I'm joined by Bree. Now she's a coffee lover. She loves her job in client relations. She's clumsy. She's funny. She's a little bit inappropriate, so I'm really looking forward to that. She's a wife and she's a mum of two, and she describes herself as just a regular person. So thank you so much for joining me today, Bree.
No problems. It's good to be here.
So it's really great. It's really great to have you here. So today we're going to be talking about, I hate to say your journey with, but I find myself kind of going that way. So you have two children.
Yes.
And your parenthood journey didn't go exactly as you had planned.
No. So, mum of two boys, and we had our boys like quite close together in age. So when I was, my eldest son was 7 months old, we conceived the second, and did the 2 under 2 journey. And before my youngest son Ari's second birthday, we found out that he was diagnosed with a rare neuromuscular condition, which is called the LMNA gene mutation, which resulted in him having muscular dystrophy, or a type of congenital muscular. I know I'm throwing a lot of words at you. But he's a part of the MD family. There's many different umbrellas that sort of sit underneath that. And from there, we realized that our lives were going to, we were going to be on a different trajectory to what we were hoping and what we thought. I think everyone says when you have children, you just wish that they're happy and healthy. And we've got the happy ticked. The healthy, look, it's a day by day thing. But in terms of spirit, we couldn't have asked for a happier child.
So, look, 2 under 2 is challenging. So my oldest two are 17 months apart, and it is challenging having two close together. And then on top of that, your youngest child. So how did you know to start looking into what this was?
Sure. So it started out from the age of about 6 months, when, you really start developing that strength to start crawling and start doing all of those things that 6-month-olds do. It just wasn't something that he was having a bar of. Tummy time was like an absolute no. All of those sorts of things that like his brother had done at the milestones that you're supposed to do things. We were like, okay, so like some things like, I just sort of was like, he's just a bit of a lazy little dude, and he's just gonna, like, he'll get there. Like, I've read stories of kids not walking until they're 3 and all of this sort of thing. But I think as well, like, he would go to daycare and, you'd pick him up and he would be like really floppy in the head. And so I think like it was seeing other people's reactions to him, because when it's your own kid, you're kind of a little bit blinded, even though you sort of know something's up.
But you see them all the time.
It's not until you see other people's reactions, you're like, okay, maybe it's a little bit more than what we thought. But we ended up, he had a breathing episode at daycare one day, like where he was, not getting enough oxygen. It was like a bit of viral induced wheezing. And we ended up taking him to the hospital. And they were like, he was about 13 months old at this stage. And they were like, there is a lot more going on than just like viral induced wheezing. You guys need to be looking into this. And that's sort of where our journey began with neurologists and testing. And, that's when we sort of went on that journey of, some of the testing was extremely invasive and quite awful. And I wouldn't wish it upon any parents. Like the testing for cerebral palsy, where they sort of stick a probe into your muscle and it releases, things that fire. That was just, awful, absolutely awful. But we had no idea what he had. We knew it was something, but we didn't know what. And we waited about 6 weeks for his bloods to be tested for the, DNA? No, not DNA.
Like the genetic testing.
genetic testing.
Yeah.
To be run. And we were told by the neurologist at the time, like she was basically convinced he had spinal muscular atrophy.
Oh.
And she was like, based on sort of how he gets around, she was guessing he was type 2. So we went away from that appointment like, okay, our son's got SMA. There's like these treatments, like Spinraza treatments and all these things. So we were sort of like, we'd geared ourselves up and we'd mourned over that diagnosis, and to come back 6 weeks later with a totally different diagnosis, like we started that mourning process all over again. And just had to start the research. Okay, it's not this, park that, it's this thing, and like let's now do our research. Like, what can you do? Oh wait, there's nothing for this. There's no treatment for this particular type of MD. He can't have the steroids and stuff that like Duchenne boys would have because he never had the muscles there to start with, and all of this. So it's not like, it's a different type of like degeneration and a completely different family of muscular dystrophy. So it's a very isolating experience, even with how rare his type is within the MD umbrella.
Yeah.
It's it's like nothing we've experienced before, that's for sure.
Fingers crossed you don't have to experience it again. But
yeah.
So going back all the way back to that appointment, you'd taken him to the hospital because he was having some wheezing. What was it like to hear, you know what, there's something else going on here and you need to be more concerned than perhaps you thought?
I don't know. I think it was just highlighting something that my husband and I already suspected. I guess if he'd have been our first child, we probably wouldn't have had that baseline to gauge it from.
Yeah.
But just having his brother, just 16 and a half months old, similar age to your two, we were like, okay, like it's like we knew, but we didn't think it was anything too serious.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely a wake-up call, but it was just like, at the same time, it was like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. You're just going to have to, I mean, there was definitely that grieving period, grieving over, my child's going to be in a wheelchair and, his life's going to be far more difficult. And, you worry about them getting bullied and invited to, birthday parties and all of those little things.
Yeah. It's amazing that it's those things that almost tip you over the edge, isn't it? Will they be able to go to a normal school? Will they connect with other people? How are people going to, will they see the diagnosis before they see my child?
Exactly.
All of those things.
Will they get married one day? Will they get to have their own kids? And all of those just things that I know that they probably seem really menial, and they're just all the things that started whirring around in my head personally. And so that's where the grief side of it sort of came from. Just all of those little things that you wish for your kids, as they're growing up, and the things that they get to experience, and going on holidays, and, all of those things. So now it's like, okay, if we go on holidays, how good are the verges, and how good is the maneuverability? Like, do we need to take the wheelchair, or do we need to take him in a pram so that we can lift
actually get up and down on the
and that sort of, so that's sort of how we navigate things now. It's like, how safe is it?
And that's probably, I guess I've seen some of the progress for that, because how old is Ari now?
He's 7.
So you've been going through this for sort of around 6 years.
Yeah.
And
it was 5 years in March. So almost 5.5 years.
Yeah. And through that time, you've gone through the diagnosis process, you've gone through the grieving process, but there's the practicalities as well. So while he's little, you go, oh, well, can I take a pram? Do I need to take a pram, or can we take the wheelchair? But how does that work when he's 22?
Exactly. So we've got our ways. We've managed to just adapt with bits and pieces. So like, he is 7 at this stage, but he still weighs the same as a 2-year-old. Yeah. Like, he's only 12 kilos. So he's like tall and lanky and very thin. And he's easy to, at this stage, we sort of put him in like a kid's hiking carrier.
Yeah.
So if we're like going off track, we'll take him in that. And I got that idea from watching some people who were adults take their male friend who had a neuromuscular condition on places all over the world, and they took turns carrying him. And I was like, well, if they can do it with a grown man, there's no reason why we can't do that with Ari. So we make it work.
Yeah.
It's definitely more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, if we book in a tour, we went up to Broome in April for the school holidays, and I had to, contact people and go, look, this is the case, on this boat, he's going to be in a pram, or we're going to have a carrier, and is this going to be okay? And so you can't just book things online like everyone else.
Can't just go, oh, look, it's a Groupon, it's nice and cheap, let's just do it.
Yeah, you've got to do your research, and you've got to make sure that, it's all going to align, that, there's no terms and conditions where, there's going to be heads whacking around and, that sort of thing. And so, yeah.
Have there been times where you have turned up for things and it hasn't been as accessible, as in people's attitudes haven't made that accessible for your family?
I don't believe so. I feel like we try to research as much as we can before we go to places. And so far, we've been okay. I think we went to one accommodation, which was in Mandurah, where we just booked an Airbnb, and it turned out to be like an upstairs place with no lift. And so it was fine. We just left the wheelchair in the car overnight, and just, him being so small, we carried him up the stairs, and he's a bottom shuffler, so he can still sort of get around, like wiggling on his bottom. And it was fine, while he's still so little. And, so no is to answer your question, not yet.
How exhausting is that? All of that research that you have to do before you can leave your house?
Yeah, it is a little. Honestly, I'm used to it now. So like it doesn't really feel like too much work. But then we haven't taken on any major travel yet. So I know, like, if we were to plan a big trip overseas or something, that's going to look a lot different, especially as he gets older, and he'll be like, Mum, I'm 8 or 9. I don't want to go on a pram anymore. It doesn't matter if I fit in there. I'm not a baby. But he hasn't reached that just yet. So while he's still so little, honestly, we're just taking advantage of that, and just we'll put him in the easy pram for as long as possible until he, decides that.
And look, to be fair,
he's too cool for that.
We took our family on a big holiday, and we'd taken a pram for our youngest, who probably shouldn't have been in a pram, but still it was for my ease. We all took turns being in that pram, all of us, so including my parents. So you never know, you could get away with it for a bit longer. But I think it's different because obviously we didn't need to be in it, and so it was a novelty, whereas it can get difficult as they get bigger, can't it?
Yeah.
So what has the process been like, as far as how does your life as a mum of 2 look different to, I guess, how you thought it would?
Obviously, navigating the NDIS. I mean, that was 4 letters that I didn't think were going to be in my, vocabulary in that way.
And you've done that with some sanity left?
It has its moments. For the most part, I would say it hasn't been the friendliest experience in terms of, you're applying for a wheelchair and they're like, well, why can't he use a manual wheelchair? And we're like, well, have you seen his arms? Like, he can't push a manual wheelchair. We would love for him to be able to push a manual wheelchair. It's just not physically possible. So just, I guess, depending on which worker you have that's assessing him, we usually bring him, because we're like, unless you see him, you're going to assume that he's got Duchenne muscular dystrophy or one of these other types where there's the ability still to potentially walk for a while, and, children of the same age. So he's just like in a different ball game. So yeah, we bring him along, and that seems to help them go in their assessment questions, like, why does he need to have X, Y, and Z? But yeah, it's been hard. We've had a lot of things that we've had to go, where they've said no, and then we've had to go back and go, no, like, let's relook at this.
Yeah.
Like, do your research. We've had our, therapists put hours and hours of work into these reports. You're obviously not reading them. So, yeah, everything that we have contested, we've ended up winning. So that's been positive at least. But the fact that we've had to contest it in the first place is, it's already a difficult journey that it just adds that extra pressure. And I've seen so many parents whinge about the same thing. So it certainly hasn't just happened to us.
I think
I feel like it's quite common.
Yeah, look, most definitely. And I think that's the part that's, for a lot of parents, the hardest part is that you have to fight for everything. And you need to be the expert in whatever the diagnosis is. You need to be one step ahead the whole time, and you don't get to be the nice, friendly, kind, compassionate, caring person that you hope that people see you as, because you've got to be a bulldog, because you need to fight for your child.
Oh, 100%. And unfortunately, it's a case of the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah.
And, you don't want to have to be the squeaky wheel. You don't want to have to be jumping up and down like a toddler in Coles, you want to be just to be able to go, hi, just following up in a friendly way. But that just doesn't work. You have to take that tact of almost being a bit of a bully. And it's, to get the results. That's been a real pain in the butt. It's just one of the things, at the moment where we're not going through any issues with them since COVID's hit. We've just had plans roll over for the last couple of years, and it's actually just been nice to not have to worry about it. But I know once they start having those in-person things again, that it's probably something. Catch me then, and I'll probably be having to whinge
a bit different. So you've got the NDIS stuff that you have to go through, and that's, been easier at the moment. But then you mentioned therapists as well. So what kind of therapy does Ari go to or access?
So Ari regularly sees an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist. There are also a lot of other moving parts in his therapy team. So he will see dietitians, he will see people that look after his orthotics or his AFOs. There will be, who else is? He's got a sleep therapist. Obviously the nurses and the team at PCH as well that he'll see. So there'll be a heart specialist, lung specialist, the neurology team, the respiratory team, all the teams. But in terms of regular therapy, it's really all the teams. Yeah, he has to see people for his teeth as well. I don't know if it's to do with his neuromuscular stuff, but got issues with those as well. Just throw it in.
Why not, honestly? And look, I totally get that you think, oh, yeah, do you know what? We've got another appointment at PCH. Which department is it with? I don't know. We'll see when we get there, type of thing. Just feel like you're juggling appointments. How do you do that when you have another child that's so close in age and so young?
And I'm not sure, we haven't previously spoken before this, but my eldest son during COVID, as it just hit, so May of 2020, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Oh, so I did know that, and I'd forgotten. Yes.
So he has his own PCH.
Oh God.
With the endocrinology team and stuff there. So it's difficult, but it's just my husband and I, we have fantastic places that we work for, which are very flexible and allow us to, take turns taking kids to these hospital appointments. And, it's lucky with having work emails on your phone, or maybe it's not lucky.
Maybe it's not. Yeah.
But, we're able to still sufficiently do our jobs and do the stuff that we need to for our kids. It's, as time's gone on, a lot of therapy appointments now happen at school, which frees up so much time for us, picking the kids up from school, driving all the way to Kulbinia, driving back to school, or whatever it is that it might be. So it's just taken some of it out, which has freed up a lot of time for us.
Yeah. And so you didn't experience any resentment or anything like that with your oldest child, that your youngest child was taking up so much of your attention?
That's probably a question you would have to ask him. I didn't
Yeah.
have any resentment personally. I feel like when he got his own diagnosis, he felt like actually a bit of a celebrity, like I'm a part of the special club now. He would walk up to people that he hadn't met before and be like, well, my brother's got muscular dystrophy, but I have type 1 diabetes. So he wears his pump quite proudly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
I,
it's,
I think that's probably one of the benefits of having them close to, well, possibly one of the benefits of having them close together is he most likely doesn't remember anything other than this.
no, no, very true. And, he got his own diagnosis by the age of 6, so quite young. So, I mean, as he gets older, he's not going to remember what his life was like
Before that.
prior to being diagnosed either.
Yeah.
So it's like in a strange way, it's kind of a beautiful little bonding experience for them.
Could they not get matching
Not
tattoos?
one that you would ever wish for your children to have, but like it's something that's special and unique to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what kind of supports do you have for you to make sure that you actually have something left in the tank?
Yeah, so as a part of the NDIS funding, we do have some like, I don't know what I can't remember what the proper term is, but like we can have carers come every now and
Respite?
then, like respite
Yeah.
type care. So like that's been like a lifesaver. Even if it's like once a fortnight, we might have someone come by for like 3 or 4 hours. My husband and I will go out. It doesn't even matter. It could just be to Target. Just stay there, walk around, get some dinner. But just it's like one night where you don't have to do the nighttime routine.
Yeah.
You get home, they're in bed, you can just sort of give them a kiss when you get home, and it's done. But we've also got great family support, which has been so integral, I think, to our sanity and to our mental health, to be able to go, they did all the training, especially for the type 1 stuff. I mean, with Ari, it's always been, you have to toilet him and you have to help feed him and those bits and pieces. It was a lot harder to sort of train with the type 1 stuff.
Yeah.
So they did all the training for that and were so happy to tackle it and to be like, you know what, we know you guys need time. So, still have them for sleepovers. You might just need to do, if a line needs to be changed or something, we're not very confident with that, but for everything else, they're able to help. So it's been, we feel very, very lucky.
And I think a lot of family members would shy away from that. Like
Oh yeah.
it feels so foreign, it feels so scary. And what happens if I do it wrong? What happens if I make a mistake?
Yeah, and with him being closer to 9 now, he can do most of it himself. He's not overly confident, but like as time goes on and he becomes more confident with all of that stuff, he'll be doing it himself, and then it won't even be something that you really need to worry about. It's only if an alarm's going off and he's asleep. You've got to wake him up and feed him some jelly beans, but that's
Oh, the whole thing. Yeah.
yeah.
So what, I guess if you were talking to somebody whose child, who they thought, maybe there's something that isn't quite ticking the way that it should be with my child, what kind of advice would you offer them?
I would definitely say that if you have a gut feeling, like just listen to it. Intuitively, I knew something was going on with Ashton, for example. Sorry, that's my eldest son.
Yeah.
For example, for about 3 weeks, something was off, something was not right. And I kept ignoring it until I couldn't ignore it anymore. And when I finally, took him to the doctor, it was like, you need to bring him to hospital yesterday.
Yeah.
And so my advice would be like, if you feel something's up, like there is no harm in getting it checked. And secondly, like if you don't like the opinion that you get, if you still feel like something's not quite right, go see somebody else. I think, mums know best, I feel. There's just something every time that those feelings have happened and I've felt something's not quite right, it hasn't been. And there's been something going on. So trust your intuition would be my advice. And also like there's so much support groups and things like that on Facebook, and like local organizations that you can get information and help from. Reach out to as many people as possible, talk to as many people as possible. It can feel very isolating, but there's a lot of people that are willing to help.
And I think that idea of trusting your intuition is so important. And we see, I don't know what's happened so that mums are being conditioned against trusting their instinct or we know our children the best because we spend so much time with them. So if you know that something's wrong, you need to trust that. And if the expert that you're going to fobs you off, or there's nothing wrong with getting a second opinion or a third opinion or a fourth opinion. And
Agreed.
We have to be the people who advocate for our children, because there's nobody else to do it other than obviously the other parent as well. So not negating their role in this, but
I think early intervention is key, especially with neuromuscular conditions. Like the sooner that the sooner that if there is particular treatment available for whatever type of neuromuscular condition that you have, the quicker you can get onto it, and the quicker that you can put those therapies in place and those preventative measures in place. So every day, every hour, I think it just is so important.
Yeah, most definitely. And how has the muscular dystrophy actually impacted Ari?
In terms of like how it's impacted him, he's got terrible contractures in his feet. So at this point, he is not standing, which means that his bone density is suffering.
So
he's also like in quite an L shape. He can't straighten out.
Yeah.
So he was supposed to have some muscles released, like his Achilles sort of muscles there released in his feet, so that he can start weight bearing again. But with COVID and stuff, everything's just been put on hold. So it's just not something that we don't really know where we stand, actually. It's something I really need to follow up, to be honest. But so he's like quite bent. He gets a lot of muscle pain. So, there'll be, a lot of massages that'll happen. And, sometimes if it's painful, he'll need like a shot of Nurofen or a shot of Panadol. But that's sort of how it's affecting him. Besides, obviously, like fatigue during meals is a huge thing, and it's a constant battle. Like one kid's cheeseburger, will take an hour and a half to eat. He drinks these like Fortini drinks. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but they're like supplement, high calorie little chocolate milks.
Yeah.
And even one of those takes over an hour to drink, and he's like, "Oh, Mum, I'm so full." It's 200 mils. It's like, it's not even a cup.
Yeah.
So that's just how little his stomach is, because he's just so slow to eat that he hasn't. It's just not big enough to.
He can feed himself.
Sorry.
He can feed himself.
He can for a period, as long as he can kind of put his elbow on the table and he has like that lever to be able to. He's got his own little ways of helping himself. Like he can help himself to drink too, as long as he's got a drink bottle with handles and he can kind of do this action.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work. Meal times are least favorite times for us.
Do you go out and eat out at restaurants and things like that?
We do. We get a lot of takeaways, as in takeaway containers to take home.
That's what I'm thinking.
We do not have the time to sit there. But like we definitely still do stuff like that, because I think that's important. Like, I don't know, we enjoy it.
Yeah.
And he still gets to be a part of it and experience it. It's just, we would be sat there for 3 hours if he were to actually finish. Always takeaway containers.
Yeah. And how's he going to school?
Yeah, good. So we're walking distance from school. It's about a 10, 12-minute walk. Mm-hmm. So when the weather's nice, we walk down, or they walk down with their neighbours around the corner. And when it's rainy, we just drop him in. We've got a wheelchair lift van. So we drop him in. And it's that side of things has been all right. So no one else can obviously pick him up from school or anything unless they leave the wheelchair at school and carry him out, and then he's got to be in like a child seat, and it's got to be the full harness version. He can't just be in a booster. he just doesn't have the trunk support to sort of, if they turn a corner, he'll just
keep going. Yeah.
straight over. Yeah.
So mainstream school?
Mainstream school.
How
Yeah.
did the teachers cope with it? What was their response?
So far, it's been fine. The school was built only in the last 3 years. This is their third year running. So when the school was being built, we met with the principal and made sure that the paths were wide enough and that there were things that, to make sure that it was accommodating for children in wheelchairs, because although so far he's been the only one, I really doubt he'll be the only one, for their whole time that they're there. So at least he's, paving the way, and, there's like accessible bathrooms and all of that sort of stuff. So
and it's things like that people take for granted. So the primary school that my eldest two went to, they had, there were ramps everywhere and there were the accessible toilets, those types of things. But she was in a wheelchair for a period of time. And out of the 6 disabled toilets that there were at the school, there was actually only one that she could use, because the way they'd been set up, it wasn't actually accessible for anybody who was in a wheelchair. So it was big enough, but she couldn't actually maneuver anything around to be able to. And I think if you haven't lived through that kind of stuff of being able to go, yeah, I know you say you've got an accessible toilet, but who's it accessible for? Or, yep, I understand that you're trying to get your car in, but I've got a boot lift, and if you park there, I can't get my child home. So those types of things.
Yeah, 100%. Been there.
And
we were parked in the city once, and they've got these big sort of bays that are sort of up on the side of the road next to the footpath, in some of the parts near like the entertainment centre and stuff. And there was a concert on, so someone decided just to come and park right up behind us. And it's got like a do not park within 3 meters, because we've got a boot lift.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get out. We were boxed in, and this guy was at the Shawn Mendes concert, and we ended up like the rangers ended up coming through when they allowed us to drive onto the footpath. But it was a school night. We were at a fundraising event, and it was like 10 o'clock at night before we managed to get out. It was an absolute pain in the butt.
Just what you want with 2 small children as well, to have to be hanging around at night time, because and you also don't want to look like the one who's doing the wrong thing by having to drive in places that you shouldn't have to.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even realize it was an option that we could do that. But, they came through and they're like, look, just drive through here. And, we followed their instructions. But like trying to get these people out at that time of the night on it was like a Wednesday or a Thursday or whatever it was. And, it was a pain in the butt for them. It was a pain in the butt for us.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure the person who parked there wouldn't have even given it a second thought of like how much he could have been,
that's it,
been an inconvenience to anybody else.
Yeah. And I think unless you've used it and you know that, you just go, oh, sweet, look, I can get my car in there. Awesome. Don't necessarily go, yes, you can, but it's going to mean that somebody else is completely disadvantaged by that. So with that, so the school was good when, checking out to make sure it was accessible. Just out of interest, were they more worried about Ashton with the type 1 diabetes?
I don't think that I would say that they were worried. I think that they were very much, I think that they were like, oh, really? Like, you guys again? Like, I think that
you
was
hit
more,
the jackpot.
It was just like, of all the people, like, why you guys a second time?
Yeah.
So I think that they were just like, look, we feel for you, so just let us know what we need to do. Like,
we'll make this
super
work the way we
accommodating
need to.
school. I can't speak highly enough of the primary school that they're at.
Oh, that's awesome.
So they jumped on, they did the training straight away. We got their personal mobile numbers and stuff, which is usually a no-go. But, we were all of us were navigating this thing together.
Yeah.
No one in our family has a neuromuscular condition, and no one in our family on either side has type 1 diabetes. So, I mean, like, both things were just totally just out of the blue, and just new things for us to try and figure out.
So what's the prognosis? What does this look like long term for Ari?
We don't really have a proper prognosis for him. So this LMNA gene mutation, as far as I'm aware, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because we haven't looked in a while, but there was no other living person with the LMNA gene mutation. Certainly not in the first few years that he was born.
Yeah.
I believe there was about 50 cases worldwide documented in history or something like that.
It's not
So
the way you want your child making
it's
history, is
like
it?
1 in 100 million, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
It's so super super duper rare. I mean, I guess like yeah, there's some people who don't even know what their condition is. So I mean, I guess for us to at least have it written down that this is what it is, I guess it's sort of helpful. But we were told as long as there's no lung and heart issues, that he has the potential to live a long life. I don't know if that means long in terms of healthy person long, or if that means long in terms of neuromuscular condition long.
Yeah.
I didn't really pry too much. I think everyone's time on this earth is uncertain. You can be hit by a bus. So I try not to think about that side of things
Yeah.
too much. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm thinking, 30s at least. That's where I'm,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get a good 30 and we can reassess then. Who knows what sort of technology and research and all of that sort of stuff will be happening.
Are you linked with Harry Perkins at all as a totally random kind of, or Parent Institute?
No,
Huh.
no.
Just as a
We do a lot
random,
of stuff with Telethon and
yeah,
the Kids Institute of Research there. We're also like heavily linked with Muscular Dystrophy WA, and that organisation, which has been like, paramount in us getting our head around things and, tackling our own mental health. They offer like services to parents and
yeah,
stuff that specialize in neuromuscular conditions, so that you can, speak to people who have helped, families grieve and that type of thing. Yeah, so it's been really great getting to know. They're a great group of people.
and I mean, you've mentioned the grieving process a couple of times, and I think that there's no way to sort of describe it, except that the child that you thought that you were going to have, that child
Yeah.
doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, what I would you paint this picture in your head of like what your child's life is going to be, and then and then it's quite ridiculous really, but
Oh, it's
you just
completely
assume that
romanticized. I've
like
got this beautiful idea of me, my husband, our 3 children and dogs walking beautifully through the park and stopping and
yeah,
feeding the duck. That has never once happened. So,
yeah.
you know,
But you get this idea in your mind of your perfect little family,
yeah,
and and having a child who's not going to walk and who's not going to be able to do a lot of physical things that you thought that they would be able to do. I mean, you just assume, my husband and I walk normally, and
yeah,
like that our kids would just walk normally too.
yeah.
And the other one would just be able to eat bread and it wouldn't be an issue. And that's like not the case. I mean, he eats bread. He still does. He's still a normal kid. He just has to count the carbs and give
Yeah,
insulin for it.
yeah.
But like, so it was grieving that like, yeah, just the idea of that perfect family
And it,
image that we had in our heads, and
yeah,
that he would be able to join a soccer team and join a swimming team and be able to swim independently and feed himself independently and toilet independently, and just all of those little bits and pieces, and you add them up together, and you know that wasn't the case in the end. Yeah.
will he? And look, I know it's like asking how long's a piece of string, and there are new things that are coming out all the time. But will he be able to toilet independently, and is it likely that he will ever weight bear?
I have got absolutely no idea. I'm not someone who's like being too optimistic with that. Not that I'm being a skeptic or anything, but it could potentially happen in his lifetime. Who knows? I have got absolutely no idea. I think with his condition being so rare is
Mm,
probably unlikely, because why are they going to focus on something that's going to help one person when there's Duchenne or Becker or limb girdle muscular dystrophy where there are thousands and thousands of people suffering. So I think like being realistic, they're going to be looking for cures for those first, and then maybe there'd be as a branch out,
Yeah.
something or treatments at least, and then it would end up being like a sub,
Yeah.
a sub effect of that. But yeah, I'm not overly optimistic, and so like I'm quite real with Ari in that. Like when he says, "Well, when I end up walking," and I'm just like, "Well, just don't focus on that as being a thing because like if you don't,
That's
is
okay.
that going to be a problem for
Yeah.
you?" And you might always be in a wheelchair, so like let's not try to think too much into it. Not that I'm trying to,
That's
you
a
know,
really hard
piss
line
on his
to.
parade, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's just I'm not trying to like be a dream ruiner or anything, but I'm just trying to be realistic. Like, and it might happen, but it also might not. So it's just keeping him more being like, are you okay being in a wheelchair? And he'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so well let's focus on that. Like let's
Yeah.
just focus on now and let's not think too much into the future. We'll just tackle this day at a time.
Yeah. But he
Yeah.
has just now. I think I just saw something. He's just done something that was unexpected. Like he's reached a milestone that you hadn't necessarily anticipated.
Yes, so he was able through therapy to sort of be in a laying position and get himself into a sitting up position. Yeah, which was just like not something at all that we thought was going to be achievable in his lifetime. And, he managed to get himself into a certain position where he could do it, which is like really amazing. For someone who has his whole life been had like we have to sit him up,
Yeah.
and then he can kind of wiggle around, but he could never get himself into that position first. It's not something that he does very often. It takes it out of him.
Yeah.
But like it's just nice to know, and I think he feels like, he's done a really great job when he does stuff like that. Like
Did you cry?
some great for his self-esteem. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's that step for him towards that independence that he can actually get himself to sitting up and then, under his own steam, and then if he wants to bum shuffle where he wants to go to, he can do that.
Yeah,
So it's just super exciting.
it is. It is for sure.
Out of interest, how many hours of therapy does he do? Is it each week, each fortnight?
It would only be like a couple. I would say like, yeah, only a couple of hours in terms of with the actual
Yeah.
therapist. And then, there's bits and pieces that we might do at home. Honestly, it's probably, if I'm honest, like a bit less since he's gotten older. He's more interested to just sit and play on his iPad with his friends. They call each other on kids' messages, and he's got his own little group of gaming friends, and him and his brother love doing that together. And so it's sort of get home, you do your homework, then you get to play with your friends, and
Yeah. And
yeah.
so he has settled into school and it hasn't been an issue that he's in a wheelchair and he's, hasn't experienced any of
No,
those fears that
it's
you had.
yeah, it was something I obviously worried about a lot. And look, I'd be lying if I were to say that there was no worry left because there's still high school yet. And
Yeah.
that's when I feel like the bullying is bad. And, that's when kids can be quite nasty and
Mm.
start projecting their own internal insecurities onto other people. But like in terms of like his little friendship group, like he's a bit of a superstar at his school. He's like a little celebrity.
Ah.
Everyone knows his name. He gets mostly, I would say, like 99% positive attention. Kids love him, and he's got a really gorgeous personality. He's very outspoken. He is very much like if there's something wrong, he will let you know.
Mm.
He's not afraid to tell it as it is. So far, it's been all right. Like, I think we're so okay because he's so okay.
Mm.
And that's a nice thing because, like, if you don't have to worry about it, it's nice to not be wasting your energy on that.
That's it. And
Yeah.
now, was he a telethon child?
No, he's been in a few telethon ads and
Yeah.
stuff, but no, he hasn't been like a nominated. Oh, sorry, he has been nominated this year. We don't know if he's been accepted, but he did have a nomination this year.
So I think I've seen him in the ads for the telethon.
Yeah.
Did you have any kind of second thoughts about whether or not to do that? And similarly, he's been in the ads for the Ability Centre as well, I think.
Yeah.
So did you have any thoughts or concerns around that?
No, we didn't. And as he's gotten older, we ask him as well,
Yeah.
like, because we get asked to be included in a lot of research stuff and sleep studies and all sorts of things. So we always say to him, we've been asked to do this, or we've been asked to be in an ad, or whatever it might be. Do you want to do it? And he will say, yep or no. And
Yep,
then
because
we will
I'm a
go with what he wants
superstar.
to do. Yeah, but he loves being in ads. He loves being on TV.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's exciting. So, and he's got
Yeah.
such a gorgeous beaming smile.
He does. He really does. Yeah.
You are incredibly positive and light to talk to. How on earth are you still this optimistic?
I learnt with a lot of therapy in at the start that like me being negative about the situation is not going to change a single thing. So it was just me taking a page out of Ari's book, to be totally honest with you. Like, just be positive unless there's something, catastrophic and really awful. Like right now, things are okay. Yes, he's in a wheelchair. Yes, he has struggles, but he is happy. He is like healthy for him at this stage. We're not in and out of hospital.
Yeah.
He caught COVID, which was my worst nightmare. I stressed about that for 2 years, like crying and inconsolable, like he's going to die if he gets this thing. And he got it easier than me.
Yeah.
And like, like he just, he's not, if he gets a cold, it's not causing any major issues and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just like, at this stage, like, I don't really feel like I have too much to worry about, as long as we stay on top of stuff for the kids and, he keeps being a happy little boy. Like, if that light changes, then I'm going to have to focus on that and, make sure that he gets, hopefully back to what he was. But at this stage, like, if he's happy, I'm happy.
And you mentioned support groups. So you mentioned MDWA.
Mm-hmm.
Any other supports or, anything that you could recommend or where you think, this place is awesome?
Yeah, I really, for us personally, that's all we've sort of, in terms of neuromuscular stuff, like that's really all that we reached out to. So that's all I can recommend. But they look after a lot of neuromuscular conditions, not just muscular dystrophy. So, I mean, there's a lot of people with SMA and stuff that, under that same umbrella and different types of some of the other neuromuscular conditions, which I can't name.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people, like there are a lot of people that they all cater to. And then depending on what state you're in will depend on, every state has their own like MDWA.
Yeah.
So, all I can say, I mean, I can just assume that they're going to be as good as it is over here, but, reach out. They have, particularly for us, they've got mum days or like, female carer days. There's male carer days. There's school holiday programs for the kids. There's all sorts of things to go out and connect with other parents or, for the kids to go and connect with other kids in wheelchairs because, with him being the only one at his school, it's like not very often that he will see someone else in a wheelchair, especially children. So it's like really cool for him to go hang out with other kids that, obviously because they don't have that physicality, they're all like right into their iPads and, games and online games and stuff. So it's like a cool thing for them to connect with.
And I suppose he won't know any different, but that he's the only child at his school who's in a wheelchair, but he's the only person that is alive with this particular condition. Like that's even more isolating. Yeah, that got me down a lot at the start. Like I used to drink a lot of wine over. I don't drink anymore. Found therapy's cheaper and more and healthier.
That self-pity in a bottle of wine just you know, as I said, through that grief period at the start, when I didn't know, I just didn't know how to digest it to start with until I just, you know, had a bit of a wake up call and was just like, look, this is just not a healthy thing to do. Like, you need to be healthy for your kids. Like, you drowning your sorrows is not achieving anything positive.
Yeah.
And just completely lost my train of thought just then. Gosh, what
isolating, being the only person with this
yeah,
diagnosis.
so I had a big cry to a bunch of Duchenne mums because they would always go on these like, you know, dinners or away together and stuff. And so I ended up being like, can someone invite me? I know, like, I don't have a kid with Duchenne, but like,
But
I'd
there's
love
no
to
one
come
else
on
to
one
go
of
away
these
with.
things. I'm like, yeah, I've got literally no one else.
Yeah.
So they did. And, you know, it was a lovely experience. And I've been invited to more since then. But I think, you know, they probably didn't realize how isolating it was.
Yeah.
But then I also understand, like, they're going to be speaking a different language to like what I'm going to be experiencing. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
The experience was the experience. It was, you know, it was fine. But like, until there's someone else with Ari's type. There are a few kids with congenital, but again, different umbrella. So the congenital, and I know congenital generally means, you know, for, like being passed on from the parents, but because Ari's was a gene mutation, it just happened while the genes were splicing in utero. So it wasn't anything that's come from my husband or myself or our genes.
It's just bad luck, really.
Oh, yeah. We won the genetic lottery.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's not the lottery you want to win, is it?
Oh, I know. No. We were like, well, thank God we stopped at 2. Could you imagine what our third would have ended up like?
Oh, gosh. So if you were talking to somebody who has a friend or relative who is in this position that you're in, so what would you be telling that friend? How can they be supportive of that mum or that dad that's going through what you're going through, what you live with?
I would say, if you're talking in terms of supporting the parents, like I would say they probably definitely need support. I feel like it's important to not really treat them any different, but if there is anything that especially if it's during that early diagnosis stage where you are going through that period where, you know, your life's just been turned upside down. Food never helps. Bring lots of food. Like when you have a baby and people cook your food, bring food. That'll always help. No. Oh gosh. What advice would I give? I guess just be there. Just be there. Check in. Regularly check in. Make sure they're all right. They're going to be obviously going through their own journey, and it certainly doesn't hurt to have people check in and see how you're going. It's obviously going to be different for other people. Some people might want to be left alone. I guess just respect whatever their wishes are. A lot of the time there's not really much you can do except for be there if they ask. So yeah, that would be my only advice.
And I think recognizing what you said as well, that this is a really isolating journey. So trying to find ways that you can actually bridge that gap so that they're not feeling like they have to do all of this alone. And you may not be able to, may not be able to relate to what they're going through, but you can empathize. And
I mean, the day that we got our diagnosis, the first thing we did was jump on Dr. Google and go, what is muscular dystrophy? And like, is there support? Like, Muscular Dystrophy Support Australia is what we like typed into Google, which we ended up creating a Facebook page called Muscular Dystrophy Support Australia because there wasn't a Muscular Dystrophy Support Australia. So yeah, that's a Facebook group that my husband and I are the admin to. We don't do anything. It's just really a place that people can join. And then if they have questions, they're able to ask, and other people who have someone in their life, or they might be the person themselves with muscular dystrophy, can answer or point in the right direction. But there was lacking help, I feel, when we sort of first started in terms of like local forums for people discussing stuff. So yeah, we took that upon ourselves to sort of start something there. But the first thing we did was MDWA popped up. So we called Piper, who's like their communications manager there, and we were like, oh, hey, we're just at the pub having a pint of beer, like crying over our the new journey that we're going to be going down. And can we come in and have a chat and like find out like
what do we do next? Where do we go?
What we can do to support our son.
Yeah.
Because we've got absolutely no idea. So, yeah.
When you got the diagnosis, I know that my intention is to wrap up, so I've got to stop asking questions, but yeah. I'm really interested. When you got the diagnosis, did they give you anything, or was it just your son has this rare version of muscular dystrophy? Yep. Off you go, on your own now.
Mm-hmm. That was exactly what happened.
Yeah.
There was no, I mean, but at the same time, I kind of, it's not like here's a bunch of brochures because like it's just so rare. So I mean, I don't really know if it could have been delivered much better than it was.
I often think, here's what it is, but here's some support services that are around. You're going to have questions, digest it, and when you do, here's some places to go where you can try and access which.
Yeah. But I guess like you would also, that would be really handy if it was like, look, I'm going to send you an email. Yeah. Here's a couple of links. Here's some things that you can look at. That would definitely be beneficial to any newly diagnosed people. And like, if there are services like, MSWA is like this monster that is just like, the MD is like this and MSWA is like, this big, huge giant. And, there's so much support and there's so much help. But yeah, if there was something like that, gosh, I hope they end up doing that for sure. In the medical world, there's a bit of a disconnect to the emotion.
There's a disconnect.
So the deliverance.
Yeah. And I think there's a medical model and then there's the psychosocial model, and the two just don't ever communicate.
No, they don't. They don't. I think, and when you're the head of neurology at PCH and you're delivering these things every day, like you would have to disconnect from it, because otherwise you wouldn't really want to do your job, would you? It would just be so depressing, delivering that sort of news to people. I mean, it's not like that you're going to have many people like cheering when, you're newly diagnosed. Unless you've been waiting for a really, really long time.
I was about to say, I think sometimes there is that thing of there's almost a celebration of it's got a name. I can, and I'm not big on labels at all, but I know that for some people that getting that label is a relief, and it feels like there's a weight off their shoulder because now it's something and I can put it in a box, and then that's a box I can deal with.
And also having that label means that you have access to support, because until you have a label, a lot of the time trying to get NDIS funding or funding for anything, you'll be funding everything for yourself. Yeah. And, the therapy is Ferrari, some years are $30,000 or more. Yeah. For all of the things that he needs. And like, there are a lot of families that wouldn't be able to afford that. Yeah. Well, I'd probably say most families couldn't afford that. Yeah. So, that helps a lot with, being able to then walk that path, being able to apply for an ACROD permit and all of that sort of stuff that, most people don't have to do. Yeah.
So before we wrap up today, are there any final thoughts or anything else that you want to share?
No, I guess like if you are newly diagnosed, like it's not all doom and gloom. There's still a lot of fun and there's still a lot of positivity. And I think like if you and your partner or whoever it is that, with your children, if you're still doing as many like normal activities as possible and having as much fun as possible, like life can still be really good and really positive. You get out what you put in, and like having a disability doesn't have to, take that away. So, yeah.
Life may look different, but it's not over.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
perfect. That's a perfect summary. You've done this before.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate that you were so open to me asking some questions about things that I didn't know about, and so I really, really appreciate you sharing your story and Ari and Ashton's story as well.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of A Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. For more information on the services we offer, head to whws.org.au or Women's Health and Wellbeing Services on YouTube and social media. Looking forward to the next episode where we uncover the hidden world of women.